Welcome back to Out of Possession, and today I'm joined by LNobbins. He's back for his brace, and we're going to be talking everything about the future of Manchester City. Is Enzo Maresca the right man for the job? Who's going to leave the squad, and who can we sign to elevate this team to the point where it can challenge for a league title next season? And I think the logical place to start here is with Enzo Maresca. And so, Nobbins, do you think it's a good appointment? Do you think it's a bad appointment? Are you indifferent? Where do you sit on it, man?
It's a very challenging one to discuss, and it basically, for me, depends on which side of the Guardiola fence you sit on. So if you are someone who likes Guardiola football, if you are someone who likes the directions football is going in and his general philosophy, then I think that you'll be quite happy with the Maresca appointment, because even though I don't think that he's like a Pep clone, I think that's too reductive. There's no doubt that he has taken a lot of inspiration from Guardiola in respect of his general philosophy and how he sets up his sides and that sort of thing. Of course, there are some key differences, but generally speaking, they are very, very similar. Whereas if you are someone who wants to deviate from what Guardiola was doing, I know that lots of people wanted Alonso, for example, which would be a very different approach and a huge departure from what we have been doing over the past few years, then perhaps he's not going to be the signing, or rather the appointments that you would want because of that similarity. So it's a tricky one. I think that it will work with the squads that we currently have, because Guardiola was obviously a very good manager for us, and he was able to make it work with our squad overall. But yeah, if you're not a fan of Pep, I don't think you'll be a fan of Maresca, because if anything, Maresca is even more focused on control and focused on being obsessed with the numbers than a Guardiola type. So yeah, that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but it basically depends on how you view Guardiola generally, I would suggest.
Yeah, I lean towards it being the right appointment. And I think a lot of people don't like it because it feels a bit underwhelming, right? Which I think anybody would after Pep, but it's not Enrique or it's not Company, these big names who would be quite exciting. It's like, oh, it's Maresca. But I think that's almost the best thing we can do, because when you're leaving like a dynasty like Pep Guardiola, right? He's been here 10 years, he's won everything. You're never going to get better than him. The whole setup is built to play Pep Guardiola football, basically. I don't think it makes sense to then go and try and get someone else in who's going to do something completely different. I think when you're going through so much change, you should try and keep as many variables constant as possible. And I think because, like you say, Maresca is probably the most similar coach to Guardiola you're going to find, he's the best guy to do that and keep things stable, which in my opinion makes it a good appointment. Because yes, the ceiling isn't as high as it might be with an Enrique, for example, but I think the floor is much higher. I don't see things going catastrophically wrong. And I think that's the best place we can be in when transitioning through these eras.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because what we don't want to be, or rather become, is United when Fergie left, for example, where there was massive structural upheaval and turmoil once he left the club. I think that's the approach that the club have gone down. Once again, it might not be the most inspired, it might not be the most interesting, but you could definitely argue it's the safest approach from the club. Let's go with what we already know. Maresca was literally at City beforehand, so they know what he is as a manager. Let's go for someone who is similar to the man that we are trying to replace, to try to keep that cohesive, to try to keep it, to try to keep the continuity as stable as possible, rather than, as you say, just having a totally different blueprint and doing a totally different style of football and a totally different structure and tactics therein. Because if you do that, of course, it could work out very, very well, but equally it could work out very, very badly. Do you want to have that risk at this potentially crossroads moment for City? Company would be more interesting, I would agree. And I think that Company would be my number one choice in this ideal world. But is Company necessarily ready? I still think that he's sometimes defensively and tactically naive. Does he need a bit more time at Bayern before City then try to get him after Maresca? So yeah, I get why people would be underwhelmed by him. I might argue that it's a good thing to be underwhelmed at this stage, given the potential turmoil after.
I'd agree with that, yeah. I think a lot of people just underrate Maresca as a coach as well, because they view his time at Chelsea as a failure, which I don't think is fair at all. I think he was really successful with that Chelsea team, and then he left because he didn't agree with the board or whatever. It wasn't a thing of your performance is too bad, you've been sacked. He walked, didn't he? And I think that's quite significant. But when you look at what he did at Chelsea, he won 2 trophies. He won in big games quite consistently. Like he beat PSG 3-0. Everyone wrote him off for that. He beat Barcelona 3-0. Like I think he does succeed in these big games, and he is clearly a very good coach. His difficulties came in those smaller games because his Chelsea team couldn't really break down a low block against Fulham, for example. That's really where he struggles. And I don't think that's necessarily a Maresca issue. I'd say that's more of a Chelsea issue of they don't have players of high enough quality to be able to break down these structures. Like where he'd have got Nacho at Chelsea on the wing, we've got Jeremy Doku. Like the difference there is significant. While he had Cole Palmer, for example, we've got Cherki, and the difference there isn't as significant, but I still say Cherki's much better against low blocks. While he had João Pedro and Liam Delap, we've got Haaland. Do you get what I mean? Like the quality in our players, I think, will fix those low block issues to a certain extent. And then you have his big game prowess that we saw at Chelsea. I think it could be quite a successful combination.
Yeah. Was it a Guardiola quote where he said something along the lines of, as a coach, it's my job to get you into the final third, but in the final third, it's your job to ultimately create and score goals. I might have butchered that or paraphrased it, but the point is that there's only so much that a coach can do when it comes to breaking down low blocks. If a good defensive team wants to defend well, it's very, very challenging to break that down just by using tactics alone. At some point, you do have to have some game-breaking moments. And as you say, we have Doku, they had Garnacho. We have Cherki, they did not. We have Haaland, they have Liam Delap, etc. It's not really a comparison in respect of attacking force. City are, or certainly were last season, the best team at breaking down low blocks. So I think that was, of course, partly due to Pep and his combinations, but it's mainly down to the individual quality to a certain degree. We have very good attacking players. I think the more interesting question is not actually going to be about attack. I think we'll actually be fine there. I think the more interesting question is actually how we are going to set up out of possession, off the ball, because that was a big problem at Chelsea under Maresca. And it's also been a big problem at City under Guardiola the past season or so. I think that's maybe going to be the biggest challenge for Maresca, because he has approached his time at Leicester and Chelsea in a very different manner to how Guardiola has over his entire City career. So is Maresca going to adapt to the squad, or is Maresca going to force the squad to adapt to him?
I think the out of possession problems are just an issue with playing this style of football now. Like it's so much harder to control games and control space like we used to now than it was 10 years ago, because we've seen teams just become so physical, and that means they're much more threatening on transition, and we can't have this control. So it's almost like trying to have this control is almost impossible. Like I think Arsenal are the only team in world football now, in my opinion, that can maintain significant amount of control. And they've done that by completely changing their squad to be super physical. We're not bothered about scoring goals from open play necessarily. We're going to do it from corners. And that could be the next progression of this Guardiola football, because we might just be at a point where you can't control games by doing what Pep's done historically anymore, and you have to try and innovate, and Arteta's done that. So I think that is the problem, right? I think Guardiola's always been a great coach, in my opinion, not necessarily because of his attack, but because of how he can defend. People will always consider him a great attacking coach, but his defense is absolutely as significant. Like he revolutionized pressing really more than he did attacking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I mean by it will be a big question as to how Maresca sets us up. So like Maresca is far more interested in man-to-man structures, for example. But if we think back to where this City side, you can argue, got its most success this season, i.e. from the League Cup final onwards, because we won 2 trophies in that period, it was the opposite of man-to-man. It was a very passive zonal front four, but that's, again, seemingly opposed to how Maresca wants to play his football. So that would be a big question and an interesting approach as to what Maresca does. Does he abandon that? Does he go more to what City were doing at the start of the season, where we're getting caught out a little bit more? Do we have the facilities and the players to do that? Is that going to get the best out of Haaland and Cherki? Arguably not. Or is he going to do something that we haven't actually seen yet throughout his Leicester and Chelsea days? Is he going to adapt and evolve and create his own zonal structure? There's lots of questions to be asked, even though we started this show by saying it's a safe pair of hands, whatever. There are still lots of question marks and lots of unknowns that Maresca is going to have to solve.
Just to rewind quickly back to the 4-2-4 passive press thing, do you think that's actually successful? Because I have issues with it, to be honest. I think it's so easy for teams to go and play through us. And yeah, we've got the results. But when I look at the performances, I'm not sure it's that much better than what we were doing before. I think recently it's been okay because we've seen it become a bit more proactive, right? But especially at the start when it was just completely passive, we'll have the ball. I just think when we played Chelsea, for example, when we played Liverpool, they cut through us really easily in that shape. I'm not really convinced it's a great solution.
No, I don't like it either. I think I might be its biggest hater. I think I said that as like early as the second game that we used it, which was against Liverpool. I think it was. I think I said. I think I was on this. I think I was on this channel actually after the Arsenal game. I'm pretty sure you asked me, "Do you think we'll do it from the rest of the season?" I said, "No, I don't think so." Obviously, that was very, very wrong, and we did do it. But the reason why I didn't think we were going to do it, even though it has won us 2 trophies, you can argue, you can make the counter argument that. Has it helped us win the title? Maybe not. But one of the main reasons why I didn't like it was because I thought it was a very specific thing for a very specific opponent in Arsenal. And if you play a team like Everton who don't care about going long because the point of the block is to make the opponent go long, then aren't you just playing into their hands at that point? And that's what happened. And we ended up dropping points in that game. Against teams like Liverpool or Chelsea, as you mentioned, all they had to do was something that Arsenal could have done if they had like Eze or Odegaard on the pitch, maybe. I think it was Wirtz for Liverpool, Palmer for Chelsea. They just like dropped that player back and they sucked Rodri out of position. And then all of a sudden they can really easily get around us and through us. And then by the time they do, it's a Rodri-less midfield and it's just like Bernardo in the back four. And that's all they have to do to get a really good run on our players. We're very easy to manipulate out wide when we play that. So yeah, even though it won us 2 trophies, so you can say it's successful in that regard, I don't think it's actually a very good setup for most games. I think there's a time and a place for it, fine. And I get why we did it. I think it's to get the best out of a player like Cherki out of possession. Because I don't think that question's still been fully resolved this season. How do you get the best out of Cherki, not only in possession, but more importantly out of it? Or this setup is perfectly suited for him, but is it perfectly suited for City generally? That's a more interesting and pertinent question. And again, how is Maresca going to view it? He's more man-to-man. This is very zonal. Is he going to abandon it? Is he going to trial it? Lots of questions are still to be asked. But yeah, I'm a pretty big hater of the setup, and I want to say I'm a day one hater because as soon as that Liverpool game happened, I was like, see guys, like Wirtz is easily manipulating us. So yeah, I've been an early hater, I will say, since day one.
Just to play devil's advocate here, is it maybe the best solution though? Because I'm not sure there necessarily is a great solution to us out of possession because we just don't have the players who are great out of possession. Like if you're playing with Haaland and Cherki, both of them are kind of a liability off the ball. Like maybe there just isn't a great solution because, like you say, if you go man to man, teams will exploit those guys. If you go in a zonal block, teams will exploit that as well. Maybe the solution is just bringing in better off-ball players. Like when you look at what Barcelona are doing in the market now, for example, they are signing players who are excellent off the ball and they are almost prioritizing that over what they do on the ball. Like they've just brought in Anthony Gordon, who he doesn't necessarily move me that much on the ball. He's not awful by any means, but he's also not fantastic. But what he is one of the best pressing forwards in the world. They want to get Alvarez in now as well, who is kind of a similar vein for that. Obviously, he's better on the ball than Gordon. He's still very good there. But in my opinion, his main strength is his pressing. They're building their team to be insane off the ball. Arsenal are doing a similar thing. I'd argue Bayern Munich are doing a kind of similar thing as well. Like this is the trend, PSG too. And maybe we're just not following the trend and we should start doing that.
Yeah, I don't think that any setup is perfect because that's not how football works. There's strengths and weaknesses to every single shape, every single formation, every single philosophy. I just think that this one has too many for my liking. That's all. I think that it's too easy to exploit against teams that don't care about playing long, and it's too easy to exploit against teams who don't want to play long, but they don't mind dropping a player back. I think that's my main issue with it. It has its benefits, fine, but it does also have its weaknesses for sure. I just feel like there must be a better solution, and maybe there isn't in the current squad, as you say. Perhaps that's why we are bringing in a player like Elliot Anderson. maybe that's also why Maresca opted for more of a man-to-man approach at Chelsea, because, okay, I'm having a go at City's defensive setup right now, but look at Chelsea's defenders. Look at the options that they had. If you have Fofana, who's always injured anyway, and Colwill, who missed all of last season basically anyway, and you've got no like Thiago Silva-like centre-back there, or no Ruben Diaz-like defender there, no like excellent box-defending centre-back there, the best approach is probably to play man-to-man, because that means that you can keep the opponents really away from your goal as much as possible. So yeah, you are going to expose yourself a bit more, but you're exposed regardless. So it is all about trade-offs. There's no doubt about it. Maybe that's an approach that we'll go to next season. Maybe Maresca will get Cherki and Haaland to be excellent at man-to-man pressing, and maybe we'll accept that there is a defensive deficiency at the back or in midfield, whatever, or in the forward line, out of possession. But the best solution is still to try to keep the ball away from our box as much as possible, because, of course, the opponent can't score a goal if the ball isn't near your box. So, it's a really complicated question. It's give and take, and there's no perfect solution. And I'll repeat, that's why I'm so interested in the Maresca appointment, because it's a problem that Guardiola himself wasn't able to solve. Maresca is very similar to Guardiola. How quickly is he going to be able to solve that problem, if at all? It's just going to be fascinating to see.
Just to touch on Cherki quickly as well, I think there's a possibility that we reach the end of next season and he's just not a problem off the ball at all. Because at the start of this season, he was like horrendous. It was a massive, massive issue. Whereas accelerated to now, I still think he is a problem, but I also think he's much, much better than he was at the start of the season.
I agree.
And obviously the progression might not be linear, but if it is linear, we'll assume here that by the end of next season, I think he'll just be fine. He's never going to be an off-ball demon, don't get me wrong, but I think it might just be it's okay.
Yeah, there's no doubt he has gotten better. And I did say that the 4-2-4 was sort of built with Cherki in mind, but there is no doubt that did help him, but he has also helped himself by just improving. And that's going to obviously just come with time in the role, which is very different to what he was doing at Lyon. For me, the question isn't more so about can Cherki get to the requisite level out of possession. It's more so, what is the position going to be that you use him in? Because I know a lot of City fans really like the idea of him playing in like an out of possession midfield 3, for example. Now, I don't know if that's ever going to happen, because he's played, to my eye, he's played there twice last season in a midfield, out and out midfield off the ball. And that was in the first home game against Spurs, where it wasn't very good. And that was the second half against Man United at Old Trafford, which also wasn't very good. And we got a lot worse off ball in that second half. Outside of that, he's either played at right wing or he's played as where he was doing more recently as like one of the two strikers leading the press, wasn't he? So I think that's the more interesting question for me. There's no doubt that he can get to the required level, but it's more so, I don't think he'll ever get to the level to play it in as like a midfielder, like a proper midfielder. I don't think he'll ever get to that level. I don't think he needs to get to that level, by the way, but it's more so, will he be leading the press in like a forwards 2? Will he be playing at like right midfield in a 4-4-2? Will he be playing a right wing in a 4-3-3? Where will the actual position be that he starts that press from? I've got faith that Cherki can get to the level. Again, the progression, as you've said, is really, really good to see. It's more a question of like dynamics, and it's more a question of where on the pitch would he be best suited, even if he can get up to that level, or when he gets to that level.
I think it's so difficult in modern football as well. Because if this was 10 years ago, you just maybe put him up front, he's kind of out the way, right? And it wouldn't matter too much. But now, if you have a player that isn't at the level off the ball, like teams exploit it relentlessly. Like we see what happens with Real Madrid because they have Mbappe, like the whole system almost falls apart there off the ball. And yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think we probably see him play as that striker, like you talked about there. I think that is probably where he's in his best role, because it isn't that damning if he gets bypassed there. You've still got that protection behind him. Right, so we'll move our focus to the transfer market. Obviously, City are going to have quite a lot of outgoings this season. We're going to have a lot of incoming soon. And I think it makes sense to start with the outgoings. And to talk about that, we have to kind of review the current squad. So, Nobbins, do you think the squad is in a good place? Do you think it's in a bad place and Pep's left it in disrepair, like a lot of people are saying? Where's your head at with it?
Oh, who's saying that he's left it in a bad place? I'm going to hard disagree with that. I think that he's left a very young squad. I think he's had a very successful transitional year as well, which has ended up in winning 2 trophies, by the way. I think he's left the squad in a great place with lots of really good, exciting young or new players like Semenyo, like Gahey, like Kusanov, like Cherki, Haaland and Foden that are still relatively young as well. I think he's left it in a great place. This isn't like a Fergie situation where he squeezed the juice out of literally everyone. He left it with the back line with like an average age of 57. No, he's left it in a very good place, in my opinion. As for, I do still have problems with like the squad and the squad building, and I've made my thoughts known on that throughout the season. But I don't think that we are that far off so long as we get a couple of select incomings spot on. Now, the signings do have to be spot on, but based on what we know, I think that we are making the correct calls, certainly with the midfield option as well in Elliot Anderson. That if that does happen, that would be a perfect signing, I would suggest. That would help remedy a lot of the issues we were talking about earlier with the out of possession situation at City. So I think the squad right now is not in a position to like win a title, probably, but with just a couple of key components, I think that it can definitely be elevated. I really don't think we're that far off. We weren't that far off winning the title last season, and we won 2 trophies, so we're clearly not a bad squad. I think we scored the most goals. We may have ended with the best goal difference as well. We're clearly not a bad squad, and we're not that far off. So no, I think Pep's done a good job for the most part.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. I think that the reason there's the narrative existing in certain spaces about, oh, he's left a bad squad is because there's a certain group of people who are like, they're not real fans. That's a bad way of articulating it, if you get what I mean. But they're so used to just like, oh, if we don't win the league, it's a disgrace, it's awful.
Right.
And because we haven't won the league this season, and this team isn't maybe as good as the treble team, it's not as good as the Centurions team, they think it's a terrible squad, but I just don't think that's true at all. I agree with you. It's a really nice young squad with lots of potential to grow. Like there's a really good graph from Gradient they released where it's got the age profiles of the squads, and you can see and the minutes they've played. And basically we've got a couple players around 30 plus, but they're all leaving this season anyway. And everyone else is a young player or just about coming into their prime. And I think that's a really good place to be, because like you say, we're kind of teetering on the edge of a title at the moment. I think if you put a few pieces in there, maybe take out a few pieces, we can easily elevate to that level. Yeah. And obviously we've got Bernardo leaving, who's going to be difficult to replace. That's a big loss. John Stones leaving. But I think there's going to be other outgoings as well. And I want to start with Tijjani Reinders. I think it's arguably the most debatable one. I am of the opinion that we should cut our losses on Reinders.
Oh my God.
And get rid of him this season, which is maybe a bit brutal. And
quite harsh.
I'll pitch my opinion now. But I think there's kind of the narrative of, oh, players take a season to settle and then they improve. But I think that's normally because they need to settle with what they're doing on the ball rather than off the ball. And Tijjani Reinders is, what is he, like 28? He's in his prime right now. All throughout his career, he's had issues off the ball. He's been really poor off the ball. And I think this season, he's been pretty good on the ball, right? He's sort of done what we'd expect to a certain extent. The issues have all been off the ball. He is just so passive, and I don't think you can carry that in the Premier League. I don't think he's good enough to play in the 10 or like as a false 9, which is kind of Pep's solution. For me, he's doesn't do enough in the tight spaces. His value on the ball comes as a 6 or an 8 next to Rodri, but he's so poor off the ball to be able to do that. There was a game a few weeks back, I think it might have been against Brentford, where he didn't contest a single duel.
Yeah,
like that's outrageous.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. Again, it is a tricky one. I do like the concept of Reinders. Like when I was watching him at Milan, there was no doubt there were some defensive issues there. Like he was not a high volume tackler. He was not a high volume duel winner. The reason why I thought it could work though, / could have worked, is that he was very good at intercepting the ball. He was very good at pressing. And overall, the main reason why I didn't consider it that much of a problem was because City's main priority is to defend by having possession. So it shouldn't matter that much because he's actually quite good at counter-pressing and intercepting. As we found this season, we have been worse at retaining possession. This has objectively been the worst season under Guardiola in respect of possession. We're still better than everyone else in the league, but compared to every other Guardiola team, this is the worst it's ever been. And that includes the 24-25 season when the squad was utterly broken. Reinders does need to have a lot, his team to have a lot of the ball to be able to succeed because he isn't this dual hungry monster. Despite that, it is inexcusable to have games where you are a part of a pivot and you don't even contest a duel. That I'm not going to defend that. That's just very, very poor and very, very bad. I think the fact that Rodri's just come back from an injury hasn't helped either. I think all our other midfield deficiencies haven't helped him either. So I'm sort of defending him there. I can understand the frustration. There's no doubt about it. And I can understand why you might have doubts about where he fits under Maresca. Because to be fair, I have been looking at our squad and some players fit really well. Others, I do have big question marks of, and Reinders is a sort of player for where he would fit under Maresca, because there's this really good quote. Spoilers for my Maresca video, but there's this really good quote from Maresca about how he's talking about Enzo Fernandez, and he basically is having the chat about how someone, I think, asked him if you can have a box midfield four which has Enzo Fernandez in it but doesn't have an inverting fullback in it, something like that. So I'm paraphrasing, but something like that. And Maresca basically said, I would only be comfortable doing that if I had Enzo as the advanced player and then both Lavia and Caicedo behind him, because Enzo doesn't have the athleticism required to have a box midfield which doesn't have my inverting fullback. I'm paraphrasing a lot there, but that's basically the point he was getting at. And that was about Enzo Fernandez. Reinders is going to be even worse in respect of like the athleticism and the duel winning and all that stuff. So yeah, I don't know really if he's going to be a perfect fit under Maresca unless he's played exclusively as a more advanced player. And I think we have more interesting players who can do that role. I think like Cherki is the obvious answer there. If we bring in an Elliot Anderson to be more of that hybrid midfielder, where does that leave Reinders? Is Maresca going to favour like players like Anderson or Foden or Cherki ahead of a Reinders, even like another midfielder? Because some people are saying we might need to sign two midfielders in the summer. So I get where I'm not saying that you're wrong, obviously, and I'm not saying anyone's wrong to that Reinders should be moved on or doesn't fit. I just don't feel easy letting a player go after a season. It's a me thing. I get that. I like to give players more than one season, just fundamentally. Even a player like Donnarumma, who I apparently have an agenda against, I'm perfectly willing to accept that he will improve massively next season. But I understand and get why people would be cautious with Reinders, especially with Maresca coming in. And sorry, I know I'm yapping a lot here, but especially because I really felt that Reinders was going to be used a lot deeper this last season. And he sort of was. And then Pep was like, I can't use you here because you're so deficient in these areas and because our squad isn't really built for you right now. And he's not really been able to thrive in that deeper role. And I know what my eyes saw for Milan. He was doing that deeper role in Milan. So he can do it, but does the surrounding environment need to be perfectly tailored towards him for that to happen? Is it just because Serie A is a slower league? Is it because Serie A is a less physical league? Premier League's a different kettle of fish. In sum, I get why people would be happy to move on Reinders. I'd be upset if we moved him on. I personally would think it's a bit premature, but I would get it. I would get it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's brutal but logical in a way.
Yeah.
I just don't see where he fits in this squad, because in my mind, he was a deep midfielder. He clearly cannot do that in the Premier League. It was like you said there, it's all well and good doing it at AC Milan in a league that's way slow and you have the environment built around you. He's not good enough to justify building the team and midfield around him at Manchester City. That's a complete no-go. The Premier League's more physical. I just don't think there's a world where he can do that role. And I don't think he's bad as a number 10. He's okay, but he's not as good as Cherki. He's probably not as good as Foden. And like you say, will he be as good as another midfielder we bring in? Possibly not. I just don't see where he plays in this squad. And I just think it makes sense to get rid, cut our losses, and maybe bring in someone else who fits as a profile better.
Right. Yeah, perhaps, but that does totally depend on incomings. We obviously don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, if I'm not precious about it, if City, I mean, not that I'm in charge of like signings or anything, but if like someone says, right, we're going to sell Reinders, but we're going to bring in X player who is way better suited to City, and it's basically a straight swap. Do you want to do it? Then yeah, I'm obviously going to say yes. Like I'm not that attached to Reinders. I like the concept of him, and I think he can do well for us. There's just something in my mind, but I just don't like moving on a player after a season. So it's just something like fundamental to me. I just don't like. I like to give players time. I'm probably a lot more patient than other fans when it comes to most players. Now, if there's a player where I'm like, no, he just doesn't suit at all, and I just don't think he'll ever suit, that's a different conversation to have. But if I feel like there's something in there, I just fundamentally don't like giving up on players. That's all. To me, I get it.
Yeah. We'll go Nico G then as well. I don't want to sell Nico G, but there's been reports that he wants to leave for game time, which I'm not completely against. I'm very much on the fence here as well, because I like Nico G. I think he's a good player, but equally, I just don't see how he gets into the squad. I don't see him as a Rodri replacement at all. I think he's a completely different profile of midfielder. He's much more of a aggressive jeweler than Rodri is, and not as progressive. I don't see him ever replacing Rodri. I see Elliot Anderson replacing Rodri, but with Anderson coming in, he's not going to play ahead of Rodri. So I think those two are almost definitely going to play together next season, assuming Rodri stays. And I think when Rodri leaves, then Anderson will move into that position. I just don't really see a way into the team for Nico G at the moment, which is why I think it makes sense for him to leave, maybe.
Yeah, similar to like my Reinders yap there with Nico G. Again, a player that I like, a player that I'd like to give more time to. And I think he's done well for us, in fairness. I think he did quite well last season. I think that there were some games where he played really good football, and Nico was like the pivots. He was doing it all on his own when Rodri was out. So I think he's done a very good job. I think that we've shafted him a little bit. I don't think I can be convinced that he joins the club if the pitch to him is you are going to play second fiddle to Rodri. I don't think he joins the club if that is the pitch. I think there must have been more to it than that. It might be wrong, but surely it would have been, you are going to sometimes play instead of Rodri, but we will find a way to play both of you together. Because otherwise, why would he join us? Because we know that if all you are going to be is a backup to Rodri, then you're never going to play unless Rodri is injured, because Rodri exists. You're going to get some like time in the cups, whatever, but Nico's too good to just be like a bit part second choice defensive midfielder. So if that is his future, I get why he would leave. I still think that he could have been used as more of a number 8 like he was at Porto, but Maresca requires very different attributes from his 8s, and, well, not very different attributes, but there are very specific things that Maresca requires. There's this really good quote by Maresca where he calls, maybe you've seen it like one of his interviews, he says something like, I like my midfielders to play in the traffic, as he calls it, which is basically just he likes small space players and players to play in like the pockets and tight spaces. And that's not Nico G's game necessarily in those areas. Like that's more of like a Foden or a Cherki, let's say. So maybe he has even less of a future under Maresca. So yeah, another player who I can see going in the summer if Maresca can't promise him game time outside of being a Rodri alternative.
I've got Rico Lewis written down next. I think we both agree Rico should probably move on. I just think physically he's nowhere near the level needed for the Premier League. And we've seen this season, right, when Nunes can't play, we've normally opted for Kushnov at right back, who offers absolutely nothing going forward there over Rico Lewis. So I think he's definitely gone. Nathan Ake, I think, is an interesting one as well. I'd lean towards Ake leaving this summer. I think we've got 4 elite centre-backs already, and then we've got Victor Reis probably coming back as well. I think it makes sense to give that 5th position to Victor Reis instead of Ake, who's got 1 season left him in at absolute most.
Yeah, I will say in an ideal world, what I would do is keep Ake for 1 more season and send Vitor Reis out on loan to somewhere in League A. In an ideal world. Yeah. But I don't think Ake is going to stay because he's good enough to start for like a upper mid-table Premier League team. let's say. So, and we know that he wants to play for the Netherlands. I think it's Koeman said something along those lines. So, Ake will probably leave, not because he's not good enough, not because there's no place for him in the squad, but probably because he will want to go play more regular football.
I will say as well, there has been links of Gvardiol maybe wanting to leave, which obviously would be absolutely awful. That would be a disaster.
Yeah, that can't happen.
If that did happen, I think then I'd be inclined to keep Ake a lot more.
You'd have to. Yeah, Gvardiol can't leave. That must not happen. No, that's very upsetting, those links. I'm hopeful that it's just his contract is up for renewal, so it's agents playing games. It has to be that. We can't not have Gvardiol because he's the best left-footed centre-back in the world, in my opinion. And we know we've been struggling with build-up. We struggled with build-up last season, sorry. And I might make a statement here. I think that Gvardiol might be a bit more, might be more important than Rodri in that instance. I think that he is that integral to how Maresca would want to build out from the back. That's how much I rate Gvardiol and his left foot.
I think just as a ball carrier as well, I think arguably he's one of the best carrying centre-backs in the world. Like what we saw last season, he was our player of the season by a mile, right? But He was so important in just being able to get on the ball and have that ability to carry it through the lines. And I think Guéhi's okay at it. Kushnov, not so as okay, but he's not awful, right? But none of them are Gvardiol. Like the upgrade to Gvardiol is so massive. And I've seen a lot of people saying that they wouldn't put Gvardiol back into the team next season, which I think is insane. And they want to stick with Kushnov and Guéhi, which is, it's mad. But as well, I think you compare Gvardiol with literally anyone, right? He works with Diaz, he works with Guéhi, he works with Kushnov, because he is just such a unicorn player. He can basically play any role. Because there is a thing with someone like Kushnov is you kind of have to pair him with someone who's a bit calmer, who maybe reads the game slightly better because he is that aggressive centre-back. Whereas I don't think that's the case with Gvardiol. He's such a unicorn, and I keep going back to that word, but I think it's the best word to use, that you can do anything you want with him. You can play at left-back as well. You can probably play him in midfield and he'd still be outstanding. He's such an unbelievable player. Losing him would be catastrophic.
Yeah, no, that must not happen at all. There's so many interesting dynamics for him under Maresca as well. I'm sure I would still like him to continue at centre-back, but if he does end up playing at left-back, then if O'Reilly isn't available, because O'Reilly can't invert every single game and start every single game, that could be an option as well. We've seen Gvardiol do that. For example, I think Maresca would absolutely love him there as well. Put him in any position, I think he would thrive. We basically popped him at striker against Sunderland, and he had more shots than any other player. I reckon he could do a job at right wing, seriously. I think he can play basically anywhere to at least a 6 out of 10 level. I think that he is that ridiculous of a player. I think the term unicorn is overused, but he is one of the very few players where I would use that term because he is so unique. Yeah, we have to do everything in our power to keep him. That must not happen.
There's been reports of Savinho leaving as well, or is wanting to sell Savinho, speaking on the right wing, which I think is really harsh. I think there is still a player in there, but I understand the move if the logic was we're going to sell Savinho because it is quite a good price. I'm seeing 50, 60 million. That's probably worth doing. If the logic was then we're going to bring in someone with real elite quality, just to throw some names out there, maybe like a Yan Diomande, Vinicius Jr., someone who's an unbelievable world-class winger who's going to really elevate you. But I just think there's no chance that happens. If Savinho leaves, it will just be another young talent coming in, which is what Savinho is, right? You've got a player who clearly has a lot of potential. He hasn't been very good this season, but there's still been performances there. There's been moments there. Last season, I thought he was one of our better players for the first half of the season especially. So to give up on this guy when he is only 22, to just replace him with someone else with potential and kind of restart that cycle, I think is just a bit naive.
Yeah, I don't. It's a very. I keep saying this, but it's a very challenging a topic to discuss, and I have very strong feelings on it. Maresca loves touchline wingers in the first instance. I would say that City's a very, very, very narrow team going forward. If you think of our best attacking players, even our wingers like Doku and Semenyo are arguably better when slightly more central and closer to goal. I think Savio is the only true, absolute, definite touchline winger at the club. Doku is the nearest one, and lots of people have been saying, well, is there a way we can get Doku even more central? Maresca loves having his wide players actually get chalk on their boots and play out wide. So to lose that player, I don't think would make much sense. That's just based on the profile of the player. Lots of people get frustrated with Savio, and I do get that. And he's a frustrating player to watch sometimes, of course. I'm not saying that he'll follow the trajectory of Doku, but lots of people are saying the same thing about Doku as well. After his first and second season, he's not good enough. Get rid of him, sell him. He's not contributing enough. Well, those people have been very quiet this season. Doku's been one of our better players. Again, I'm not saying Savio's going to become that next year, but I don't like to give up on young, relatively inexperienced players for that reason, because I think Savio has a lot of potential. The transfer market is the one that kills it for me, though, because if you said, right, sell Savio for 60 million quid, whatever, and you're going to bring in a player who is an exact same profile, but is better and is an upgrade, I'd be like, fine, do that, because I like Savio, but I'm not like emotionally attached to him. If there's a better option out there who's the exact same profile fit, go get him. Not a problem for me. What I would want in a Savio replacement, though, is someone who can play on the right. Obviously, if they can play on the left, great, but primarily a right winger. I'd want them to be left-footed. I would want them to be able to be a proper touchline winger. I would want them to be a creative force. Outside of Yamal and Elise, and I guess Saka as well, like the elite right wingers of the world. Beyond that, you are looking at prospects. You are looking at young players like Diamande, or people said Makadu as well. He's an academy player. I'm sure he's very, very lovely and high potential. But again, that's a prospect as well. Diamande himself is not even left-footed either, as I understand it. I think it's actually maybe both-footed, but he's more so a righty, as I understand it. People say Akliouche. As I understand it, he plays more centrally for Monaco rather than out and out at right wing. There isn't this immediate upgrade who is definitely going to tick all the boxes and will definitely be better than Savio. I think for some people, they're not even content with Semenyo. I think they actually want him to be better than Semenyo as well, which raises the bar even higher. Now, I'm very convinced that player doesn't exist out there. So I think that at best, it's a sideways move. Unless there were this obvious option to go and get, I don't see the value in moving him on this summer. If he has like another season, next season, like the one just gone, then fair enough. Cut your losses, go get another prospect. But at this point, it just seems like we're kicking the can down the road almost, and we're just like, well, that one hasn't worked. We'll go get another one. How long are we going to spend on that player? Oh, I'm bored now. Go get another one. I just think there's some sort of shiny new toy syndrome going on here. I'm not saying you can't be discontent with how Savio's performed over the past. Well, first year I thought it was good. Second season, maybe not. I just don't see the value in moving him on, because people say, "Oh, go get Elise." We're not going to get Elise. That is not attainable. Let's be serious. Go get Diamande. Okay, fine. But he's 19 years old and has played one season in the top flight. How long until you get bored of him as well? Is I guess the question. I just don't want us to end up in this cycle like where Chelsea have been, for example, over the past couple of years, where it's just sign player doesn't work, move him on. Sign player doesn't work, move him on. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I get you. I think if the replacement was Diamande, I'd be for that. I think Diamande is somebody who has the potential to be.
Is he right-footed?
Or Yamal.
He's right-footed,
he's both-footed. Okay. I haven't watched tons of him. Like, this is coming from someone who I've maybe watched 2 games of Leipzig this season, and I've watched some highlights. Like, I'm not an expert on Diamande by any means, but like his data is unbelievable. And maybe this is a bit poor analysis because I haven't watched lots of him. This is mainly from what the data says, but like his data is up there with like Elise and Yamal. And when you watch clips of him, he is a really exciting direct dribbler. He's kind of the type of guy who you'd think, yeah, you do play inside more at Leipzig, but you could easily be a touchline winger as well. He does remind me of Doku in that respect. Follow-up question, sorry to interrupt you. Do you think that he would be content to come to City and play second fiddle to Semenyo? I don't think he would play second fiddle to Semenyo, though. That's the thing. I think I think he's probably a better player than Semenyo. I don't think that's crazy to say. Okay. The issue with it is then you've kind of got 2 quite similar profiles, in my opinion, in Doku and Semenyo. And then I think if you've got Cherki in there as well, you're kind of just going all in on creativity. And I think Semenyo is really useful, A, because of what he brings off the ball, and B, because of his goal scoring ability. Like, I think Diamande's a better player overall, but Semenyo is probably a better fit for Man City. I think the dynamic is quite nice there. So if you're bringing in Diamande, does that work? I think there's questions there, which is just why it makes more sense to stick with Savinho, in my opinion. Like, Savinho is the guy, and like bringing in a talent like Diamande, like I say, you can't be upset about that. I think that probably makes sense. But in terms of the squad building, arguably Savinho is a nicer fit despite being a worse player.
Yeah. I think that the point you make there at the end there is interesting, because whenever I talk about the fact that I don't want Savio to go, it's not because I think he's this sick player who is like absolutely elite. Now, I think he could become an elite player like in a few years' time. That's a potential argument. But the point isn't about what the player is and their quality level necessarily, but it is more so about the fit as to what the player is and the profile, especially through a Maresca lens. It's less about the overall quality. So, for example, I think Marmoush is a far better player than Savio. I know, but they're not the same positions, but hopefully my comparison will make sense in the moment. I think Marmoush is a far better player than Savio. I prefer Marmoush to Savio, but I don't see where Marmoush fits in. I know we might be talking about Marmoush later. I don't see where Marmoush fits into a Maresca team, but I can see where Savio fits into a Maresca team. So I would be more upset if we lost Savio in the summer than Marmoush. Even though I prefer Marmoush, and even though I think Marmoush is a better player, it's not about like a FIFA rating or whatever. It's about, does the player fit the structure that the manager wants to achieve? And I think Savio does do that. I think other players maybe less so.
I will just say, to finish off on Savio as well, I don't think Diamande is obtainable. Like, I think he's almost certainly goes to Liverpool or PSG, because he would play week in, week out. There's not this question of, will you play over Semenyo? Maybe not. I'd argue a PSG especially is a more stable project at the moment and a more desirable project. Like, I don't think there's any chance we go and get him anyway. And then it comes down to, we're just signing guys who are very similar to Savinho in terms of their projects, and they might not fit as well, and you're probably going to lose money overall. I just don't see the value in getting rid of Savinho unless you kind of change the system away from what we maybe expect from Maresca. And this is my theory, because we talked about Marmoush there. I think it was looking like, oh, he's almost certainly going to leave because he doesn't really fit. And then there's kind of been a U-turn recently, right? And it's now Savinho is the attacker that's going to leave and Marmoush is going to stay. I wonder if Maresca has a plan to be able to fit Marmoush into this team. Because when we talk about Semenyo, I'm not convinced that Semenyo is amazing as a touchline winger. I think he's almost poor there. His value for me comes as a central player, and in that two-striker system with someone like Haaland, which is also where Marmoush fits. So if there's a way to play that two-striker system, maybe what we saw in January time, Savinho starts on the right, and then we get a fullback, right back who's going to bomb up and down that right touchline. I think that could be what we see next season, even though it's not very Maresca. I think that makes sense with the squad we have and what we're looking to do in the transfer market.
Yeah, I guess that goes back to that quote I gave earlier about how Maresca, if he doesn't have a defender in the midfield, and therefore if he has one out wide, then he's only comfortable doing that if his midfield is properly secure, like properly secure. So because I agree that a great way to get Marmoush into the team would be like with like a false winger setup, and Marmoush plays left wing technically, but then the left back pushes up. I've said how that can be a really good way to get Marmoush in the team. We saw that in his first half season with City quite a lot before he just became like a Haaland alternative. But Maresca's never done that consistently. He's flirted with it with like Gusto and Palmer on the right side. But when he's done that, the trade-off has been, I will only do this if I have a really stable midfield behind that. And maybe that's where like a Rodri Anderson deep pairing comes into play. But will he go as far as allowing for, I know Marmoush wouldn't play in like a box midfield, but like just for the purposes of this explanation, would he be content with Rodri, Anderson, Cherki, Marmoush, for example? Or is that going to be too weak for him? Because again, that in the traffic example, Marmoush is not that sort of player either. It's an interesting one. But Maresca would have to do something that he's never done consistently throughout his managerial career for it to work. Not saying it can't work, but just based on the available evidence, what we know about Maresca and his principles, Marmoush doesn't currently fit. But he's always experimenting, so who knows?
Yeah. This is why I think that's probably unlikely, because like you say, he's never done it before. But in my head, that's the only way what we're doing can possibly make sense. Because if he was just going to do something similar to what he's done before with touchline wingers, I just think obviously you'd get rid of Mamouche and keep Savinho, because Mamouche, he's a great player, but he's not an alternative to Haaland. Like when he plays as a solo striker, I think he's objectively quite bad. His game is playing as that second striker next to Haaland. Maybe he's moving in off the left, like you talked about. Maybe he's starting as a cam. That's where he's great. So it doesn't make sense to keep him if you're not going to put him in those positions frequently. And I don't think it makes sense for Mamouche to stay from a personal perspective if he's not going to be playing frequently in that position as well. I think if you're Mamouche, you'd probably go and leave. Like you could go to Barcelona probably instead of Anthony Gordon. Like they'd have him. So I think just for him to stay, there has to be something that's going to happen to get him into that team. And we'll go on to signings now because I think it makes sense, and we'll talk about right backs. But the right backs we're looking at in this market are not inverting guys. They're guys like Marco Palestra, Michael Coyote. We've been linked with Pedro Porro recently as well. I don't know how concrete that is. They are flying fullbacks, kind of similar to Kyle Walker, who are going to push up wide and make that overlapping run, which would make sense for having this inverted winger on the right side, like a Cherki or a Semenyo.
Yeah, and that could definitely be a thing. I would like it to be one because I've made my thoughts known about how narrow we are as a squad, and I don't like that. So even though I don't personally like the 2-3-5, for example, for a number of reasons, but I still advocated it as the best setup that we could have done last season. In my opinion, it was the best setup that we did last season. I know lots of people don't agree with that, but I personally felt we played our best football in that period around the Bournemouth and Liverpool and Dortmund game, I think it was, where we ended up doing that. And that was achieved with Nunes and O'Reilly as your width holders. So if you don't have natural touchline wingers, because our squad's very narrow, because you've got players like Cherki, Foden, Reinders, even Doku, Semenyo, whoever, to maximise them, just use your fullbacks out there instead. So if Maresca's willing to go down that route, I'd be very, very happy if you were going to do that. He just seems a bit obsessed with having a defender in the middle. I think that Maresca's a more defensive manager than Guardiola, certainly with how he wants to guard against transitions and rest defence. And it's a lot harder to do that if your defender is at left wing versus if your defender is in the middle of the pitch, where it's more dangerous. So I'm not saying it can't happen. I would like it to happen. But based on what I know about Maresca, or rather what I understand about Maresca, he would be more concerned with having a defender inverting rather than progressing. Again, I would like to see him progress the fullbacks like that. It just opens more avenues.
I agree, but I think it's just there seems like a complete opposite almost, like between what Maresca would probably want to do and what we're seemingly doing in the transfer market. Like the two don't seem very cohesive at all. Because like you say, Maresca, we probably think of him as going that inverted style, yada, 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 wide wingers. But then the transfer market completely contradicts that idea. And I'd be interested to get your thoughts on which right back you think would be best out of the three options I named before. So Palestra, Coyote, and Pedro Porro. And do you think they play over Nunes? Because I think Nunes is really good, especially defensively. He always had that bozo moment before, right? But he's ironed that out his game almost completely now. I think he's just a really secure, solid 7 out of 10. And I'm not sure what he offers in the final third is amazing. I think he's a great crosser of the ball, but how often do we actually do that? I think that you could get a better player for what they do in the final third, but I think he's just so consistent. I'm not sure I'd want to replace him.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be much use at commenting on those names. The first one especially, I don't think I've ever seen him play. Who's he play for? Sorry, that first option?
I've watched like maybe one game and watched a couple highlights and got that. He plays in the Serie A he's been on loan from Atalanta, I think, this season. I can't remember who he's been on loan for. But again, he's a very young attacking prospect. He kind of profiles a bit like Kushnov in terms of he's very raw and physical and probably has the ability to develop that technical stuff later. Yeah,
so I can't comment on him in all honesty because I've not watched him. Porro, I think, is a stinky option. I have watched plenty of him at Spurs. I think that he's fine. Is he better than Nunes? If your answer is yes, is he that much better than Nunes to justify bringing him in? Like, does he have much more of a ceiling to his game? I would suggest no. So that's not a signing that moves me. I know that he did invert a lot under Ange. So that might make sense theoretically. I know that he's also capable of pushing out wide, so I do get that. Coyote is an interesting option. I do rate him as a player. They don't move me though, and that's very intangible, but I'm not moved by any of those names. The profile that I'm more after is someone who isn't as good as Núñez now, but doesn't need to be as good as Núñez is now, and is very, very young, and is very versatile, and can be second choice like next season, maybe even the season after, but will still get game time. And then in like 2 or 3 years, their ceiling is very high, and they will have overtaken Núñez. So I would rather the younger names that we were linked to more so earlier in the window. So players like Reed from Feyenoord, or players like Martin Fernandes at Porto, maybe even Costa at Porto. I want a player who is preferably able to play right back, right centre back in possession. If they can invert, brilliant. If they can play right wing, brilliant. But they have to be quite versatile. I was going to say in a Guardiola team. Then in a Maresca team, they have to be quite versatile. Obviously, it's more so the age factor that I'm interested in, like high ceiling potential. Because I'm with you. Like Núñez has proven that he can be okay. Fine, there's some bozo moments still here there sometimes, but generally speaking, Núñez is like a 7 out of 10 every single week. He's always going to have a good game, generally speaking. Maybe not, sometimes there will be exceptional games, but generally speaking, Núñez is a very stable player week in, week out. That's what he has become. I think that's perfectly fine. So I don't necessarily need an immediate upgrade on that. I need a long-term upgrade on that. And I just need an alternative as well, because if Núñez ain't playing, then we have literally no one, especially if Rico Lewis is going. He wasn't playing anyway. I don't rate Kusanov as a right-back option. We need someone there, because if Núñez is not there, it means that we're playing someone who offers dick all in respect of the attack. So we need something there.
There's that stat going around at the moment, isn't there? Where it's like, I think we're 35 games unbeaten with Núñez in the team. And then as soon as Núñez goes out the team, we lose. And I don't think that's necessarily because Núñez is amazing, because I think he's just decent. But I think it's more because, like you touched on there, the guy coming in when Núñez isn't there is god awful. It's either Kushnov, who, great centre-back, not so great right back, or it's Rico Lewis, who just cannot hack the Premier League at all. I don't think it's necessarily a reflection on Núñez is as important as Rodri was when he was going on these crazy unbeaten runs as well. It's more of a reflection of the backup is awful. And just to rewind to what you were saying before as well, I'd agree that the young profile is the way to go, which is why Palestra would probably be my favourite out of the 3 names I listed. But I know there's that guy at Feyenoord, like you talked about. I don't know his name. I haven't watched any of him. But someone like that, I think, would probably be the better option, who could come in, play second fiddle to Núñez, and maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, overtake him, and hopefully someone that has a high ceiling as well. I think that's the logical thing to do. Yeah,
definitely. I'm not as harsh on you on Rico Lewis, by the way. I think he can hack the Premier League. I just don't think he's a right back. So I don't think it's fair to judge him because he's a midfielder and not a right back. But there is no doubt that the alternatives aren't good enough in a vacuum. The alternatives, more importantly for me, are not the right profile. Again, it's not about, I think Núñez is the best right back in the world, but he is one of our most important players, not necessarily because of his quality, but because of the profile fit. Again, it's not about the overall quality of the player. It's more about where do they actually fit in the side, and is there a backup for him? The answer is no, especially not an offensive one anyway. Okay, maybe Kusanov can do a defensive job there, fine, but he's not going to offer anything going forwards, and he massively limits us in that final third.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's been links that we're looking to bring in a winger as well, which we've kind of touched on already when we talked about Savinha. But if Savinha is leaving, you expect us to bring in another name. I think we've talked about this before, right? We both agree that there's not really a great option unless
there isn't. Wait, if you sell him, you have to bring in an alternative. If you sell him, surely.
Yeah, I don't see who is my problem, and it's like there's. So I think that's not a great discussion or result there, but I think it's the truthful one.
Yeah, maybe the club have an idea. Maybe there's someone who was like, yes, we're definitely going to go for him. But right now, it almost seems like we're selling him for the sake of selling him. That seems to be what is happening right now. Maresca hasn't even been appointed as the manager, and we're trying to get rid of players. that just seems like a weird approach to me. Shouldn't we be waiting for the manager to actually get appointed, get his hands on the players, have conversations with the players, and then have the conversation about moving them on? This seems like a very weird political situation that's happening upstairs rather than something that's based on like squad fits. It just seems like a very odd dynamic that's going on.
My counter to that would be, because Maresca has basically certainly been the guy. I think it's been clear Pep's been leaving since like December almost. Like it's been almost guaranteed. And it's been clear from that moment that Maresca is going to be the guy. I think it is such a weird situation in terms of we've known this for a long time. I imagine those conversations have already taken place, at least with the board between Maresca.
So why are we moving on a touchline winger who'd be perfect for Maresca then? I don't think I agree with that.
I don't agree with it either, but I feel like there must be a method to the madness almost that we're not aware of.
I think you're placing too much faith in our boards. I don't. I think that we're just making a fundamental error, personally.
We've got Elliot Anderson coming in as well, who's basically done already, from my understanding. If Elliot Anderson wasn't a Manchester City player next season, I would be very surprised. And I think he fixes a lot of issues we have. Like, we've talked already in this podcast quite a lot about the out of possession problems we've had this season, how teams have just cut through us. And to a certain extent, I think it's systematic, but it's also due to guys like Rodri have lost their legs a little bit. We don't have that physical presence in the midfield that other teams necessarily do. And I think Elliot Anderson goes a long way to fixing that. I think he's like won the ball the most times in the Premier League this season. He's pretty good on the ball as well. Like, I think he's made the most progressive passes. He's just clearly a really elite talent. And I think we should pay whatever we can to bring him in, because I don't think there's a better alternative. And I think he's one of these players that are completely needle moving. And when they are on the market, I think you should go and get them no matter what.
Yeah, we cannot afford to make further errors in this area of the pitch. Basically, we have still failed to replace Gundogan, and it's 2026, really. Gundogan left. We brought in Kovacic. He was like a squad option. We couldn't get Bellingham. We couldn't get Rice. We got Nunes. He failed as a midfielder. That's why he's playing at right back. We've brought in Nico G. He's apparently just a Rodri alternative. We've brought in Reinders. We've chatted about him at length. We can't afford to mess around in this position. And if that means overpaying for the perfect player, then so be it. We didn't get Bruno G either. That's another player to mention. So many players that we missed out on because we were not willing to cough up the money or whatever the situation was at the time. Yeah, this is probably the most important position that we do need to get right. So I think it's worth overpaying, because if you can... How old is Anderson? Is he 23, 24?
Something like that. I'm not entirely sure. He's a young player.
Exactly. So he's young. So he's got his best years ahead of him. You're going to have him for like 6, 7, maybe 8 years. It's worth spending a lot of money on him if you're going to have him for nearly a decade. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, he solves a lot of the problems that we have. He plugs holes in the squads that we currently have. There's no doubt about that. He's also homegrown, which makes a lot of sense. Like, there's a reason why we've been signing, our last 2 signings have been homegrown players. That's still a factor at play here. It makes too much sense, really. He's not a direct Bernardo replacement. No one is. But he has traits that Bernardo didn't, and which this squad needs. And if you have like a pairing of Rodri and Anderson, that's pretty perfect as a pairing, because like Rodri covers a lot of the deficiencies that Rodri has. Anderson covers a lot of the deficiencies Rodri has, but he's also very good in possession as well. I think like lots of people look at him, English midfielder, runs around a lot. That's all he does. He's actually very good on the ball as well. Like, he's actually very good with the crossing and the passing. He's one of Forest's main sources of creative like passing threats, and people will look at like passing accuracy and go, well, it's quite low. Does that mean he's bad at passing? It's more to do with the fact that at Forest he is the guy. He's tasked with doing everything really in that midfield. So of course his passing accuracy is going to be relatively low. Now it can get better, his passing generally, of course, but it's not a bad thing that it is low. It just shows that he's a player who tries a lot of things, like a Cherki or a Kevin De Bruyne. That's not a problem. It makes too much sense to bring him in.
I will just say as well, I don't think passing accuracy really means anything. Normally, the players with the lower passing accuracy, they're not bad. They're just players who are better at passing, and therefore they're attempting more riskier passes. Yeah. I think a better metric is expected pass over performance percentage, if we're going to get really neaky with it. But that basically quantifies, okay, what's the chance this pass is successful? Are they making these passes more than expected, or are they doing it less than expected? And I think that gives you a better range then, because it kind of removes the effect of easy passes. And not to talk about Donnarumma, because we've avoided that today quite well. But the argument so many people put up against him is, oh, his pass percentage is high. And it's like, well, yes, he's playing easy passes. Like Edison's, exactly. I'm pretty sure Edison's is lower than Donnarumma's. That could be wrong. But I think I've seen that somewhere because he's playing riskier passes.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think Anderson makes sense. A lot of people are angry at the price as well, which I don't really get. I think market inflation has gone up so much in the last few years, and it hasn't really gone up in people's heads. Like 100 million for a good player now is kind of just what you pay. Like there's been outrage yesterday about Barca have paid 80 million euros for Anthony Gordon. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what a good winger costs nowadays. Like Elanga was moving for 60 last season. These are the prices of good players. If you want good players, you have to pay this. I think that's just the reality of it now.
Yeah, look, we're living in a world where Enzo Fernandez went for like £105 million or whatever. Caicedo went for like 110, 115, whatever it was. Rice went for like 105 million as well. I don't know how much Bellingham went for, but I think that was probably a lot of money. Oh, was that a release clause? I don't know. Anyway, we're living in a world where like these Premier League signings are getting into the triple, the 100 million, 9 digits. 9 digits?
That's the one. Something like that. They're 100 million plus.
Yeah, exactly. That's the realm that we are currently operating in. That is the landscape of the market. So is Anderson worth 100 million in a vacuum? Maybe not. Is he worth that with the context of the market? And is he worth that to City? I would say yes.
Absolutely. I would argue as well that I think he's probably better than Declan Rice was when he left West Ham. I think he's certainly more complete with his passing. Probably. I'd argue he has a higher ceiling as well. Maybe not off the ball.
Yeah, very different player. But yeah, definitely. I think that's fair.
I just think the price is fair. Like, I'd pay it. I'd go up to like 120 for him. I think the only way we shouldn't sign Elliot Anderson is if the price gets to a point where it'd be better to just go and get João Neves for 20 more. But I don't think that's an obtainable option. So I think we should just pay whatever, basically.
Yeah. And that's the other conversation, isn't it? It's like, what are the alternatives? And if João Neves isn't attainable, for example, then realistically, what are the other realistic alternatives? And we've tried so many and we've failed so much. We just can't afford to fail again.
Yeah. On the assumption that one of Nico G and Tijani Randes leaves, which I think is quite likely, and obviously we discussed that earlier as well, I think we'd need to then go and bring in another midfielder. Kovacic is another name that could leave as well, but I don't think he will. But either way, if one of these guys leaves, we need another midfielder. And I'm not really sure who that will be. We were linked with Enzo Fernandez, which is a bit, pretty good footballer, awful person. Stay away. But I'm not entirely convinced there's a great option on the market there at the moment. Ibrahim Mazza from the Bundesliga is someone we've been linked with. I don't have much insight there. I haven't watched much of him. I don't know if you have an insight that you'd like to share.
Yeah, well, I've not watched I'll accept that I've not watched whole games of him, but I did on my channel, I did a scout report analysis where we looked at lots of data, but we also looked at his key moments from his entire career, including when he was playing in the second tier. And my conclusion was that he is more of an early Bernardo Silva player. So if you can picture what Bernardo Silva was at Monaco or what Bernardo Silva was in his first season with City, very, very similar. He's capable of playing in all the phases, but he's very young. The player he is right now, he's better utilized higher up the pitch, more of a 10 or maybe an 8, even out wide as well. So if you want to replace Nico G directly, probably not the routes to go down, but he might be an interesting player in isolation.
I'd argue that Elliot Anderson is probably more of a Nico G if he did leave, and then you could argue that Massa would be the Bernardo Silva then. Either way, I think you kind of maintain a similar kind of balance in the squad. It's not a disaster.
I think Mazza's early Bernardo. I don't think he's anything like current Bernardo. I guess that would be my problem with that, because I'm viewing Elliot Anderson right now as the Bernardo Silva replacement. Again, I know they're not the exact same, but So I'm viewing it as like that. So if Nico left, I would want a more defensive-minded midfielder rather than a Mazza.
I just think we miss like a Gundogan so much. I've been going back and watching a couple like Centurion kind of time games recently, and the thing I think stands out so much that we miss now that we had then is just like quality number 8. Like, I don't think we have a single one in the squad. Maybe Foden can play that position. I think that's a conversation for another day. But back then we had like David Silva, Gundogan, Bernardo was kind of that guy then as well. There was so many quality players in that position. And I don't even think we have a single one now. Maybe Phil Foden, but then Reinders, he's not really that guy for me. I think we need to bring in someone of that kind of profile. And I'm not sure there's an obvious option on the market out there. But if there was, I think that should be almost number 1 or number 2 priority after Elliot Anderson for us.
Yeah, as you said, I just don't know who that player is. I think that Anderson sort of is that player. I know I've said that Bernardo, I'm viewing Anderson as the Bernardo replacement, but I'm also viewing him as the Gundogan replacement. So I'm just thinking, does that sentence make sense? Yeah, profile-wise, I think that we're replacing Gundogan, but like personnel-wise, we're replacing Bernardo, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does.
Yeah. I think that's the problem with the market at the moment, though. It's like, great players are so scarce that it's like it's quite easy to go, oh, we need this, this, and this, and then we'll win the league. But a lot of the time that doesn't exist. Like, elite players are elite because they are one of one and completely unique, which is why it's so difficult to maintain dominance and replace them, because you can never replace them directly. Every time an elite player moves on, you have to replace them with someone who's slightly different. And I think that means reinventing your squad and evolving a bit, which is difficult in itself. And it's why it's so hard to stay at the top, which again, that's probably not the best answer for the podcast. I think it'd be nice if we could go, we need this player to win the league, but I don't think that's the reality of it.
Nah, not that straightforward.
Yeah, I think that concludes the podcast. So to run through it back, we are selling one of Nico G and Tajani Reinders, Bernardo Silva, John Stones, Rico Lewis, possibly Nathan Ake and Savinho. And we are going to bring in Elliot Anderson, a mystery midfielder, a mystery right back, and a mystery winger.
There's lots of mysteries here.
Lots of mysteries, but hopefully the board, who pay a lot of money to people to do that job, who are more intelligent than us, can solve it. Anyway, thanks for coming on, Nobbins. That was an enjoyable discussion. Do you want to plug your channel? I'm sure people know you if they've made it this far. But
yeah, of course. Yes. So it's LNobbins on YouTube. Hopefully in the coming days, I will be releasing my How Will Enzo Maresca Set Up Manchester City video. It is a 5,500 word script, so it's going to be like 35 minutes of video. Don't know how I'm going to edit that, but we'll find out. But it will hopefully be the most comprehensive video on how Maresca will set up City, so stay tuned for that.
And if you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Get in the comments, let us know who is the mystery right back, mystery winger, and mystery midfielder. And if you're listening on Spotify, give me a little 5-star rating and follow the podcast, please. And goodbye.